My mother-in-law was on her knees in my hallway at 11 o'clock at night, sobbing into her hands, begging me to open the door. 3 hours earlier, she had stood at the head of her dining room table, raised her wine glass, and told 23 members of her family that marrying me was the worst decision her son had ever made. I want to tell you everything, but I need you to understand something first. My name is Maya. I am 31 years old. I am a certified public accountant, which means I am very, very good with numbers. I am also, apparently, very good at being invisible because for 6 years, I paid for a life that never once had room for me in it. Let me start at the beginning. I met my husband, Daniel, when I was 24. He was warm and funny, and he looked at me like I was something worth keeping. His family was loud and close-knit and overwhelming, in the way that big families sometimes are. Sunday dinners that ran past midnight, cousins who called each other every single day, a mother who had an opinion about everything and delivered each one like it was scripture. Her name is Patricia. Everyone in the family called her Pat. I called her what she asked me to call her, which was Mom. Though I want to be honest with you, that word never felt right in my mouth when it was directed at her. Daniel and I got married 2 years after we met. It was a small wedding, because that's what I wanted. Patricia made it clear, more than once, that small weddings were a little sad. She said it while smiling. She always smiled when she said the things that were meant to cut. The financial situation began quietly, the way most things that later define your life tend to begin. Daniel's father had passed away 4 years before I came into the picture. He left behind a house, a modest savings account, and a business that had been slowly bleeding money for the last decade of his life. Patricia had kept the house, but let the business close. The savings account, by the time Daniel and I got married, was nearly gone. Daniel told me his mother was a little stretched. That was how he said it. A little stretched. What he meant was that she was 3 months behind on her property taxes, that the HVAC system in the house had failed 2 winters ago and hadn't been replaced, and that his sister, Renee, who still lived at home at 29, had not paid a single dollar in rent since their father died. I found all of this out gradually. A bill here, a conversation overheard there, a moment when Patricia mentioned, very casually, that the roof was starting to be a concern, and then looked at Daniel in a way that made my stomach go still. I want to be clear about something. I did not resent helping. I am someone who believes that family takes care of family, and when I married Daniel, I married his family too, or I tried to. I genuinely tried. So when Daniel came to me and said his mother needed help with the property taxes, I transferred the money. When the HVAC company sent a quote that made Daniel go pale, I called them back and put it on my card. When Patricia mentioned, over Easter dinner, that the kitchen ceiling had a water stain that was probably nothing, I hired the contractor and I paid him, and I never mentioned it to anyone. I did not do these things to hold them over anyone's head. I did them because I thought that was what you did. I thought that was what love looked like. What I did not know, what took me an embarrassingly long time to understand, was that Patricia had a very specific idea about who I was and what I was worth, and no amount of money wired quietly into her account was ever going to change it. She thought I was too quiet, too serious, too focused on work. She thought I didn't laugh enough at the right moments, and laughed too much at the wrong ones. She thought my apartment, before Daniel and I moved in together, had been very cold. She told me once that I made her son seem less like himself, though she could never explain exactly what she meant by that, and when I asked her to, she smiled and said, "Oh, you know what I mean." I didn't. I never did. But I kept paying. Because Daniel loved his mother, and I loved Daniel, and I told myself that the rest of it was just friction, just the adjustment period, just what it looked like when 2 families tried to become one. That was what I told myself for 6 years. The dinner was a Sunday in March, Patricia's birthday. She turned 62 and wanted a proper celebration, which meant the whole family, all 23 of them, cousins and aunts, and Renee's boyfriend of 2 months, who I had never met, crammed into that house with its replaced HVAC system and its repaired kitchen ceiling and its property taxes that had been current for the last 4 years running. I had helped Daniel pick out Patricia's gift, A weekend stay at an inn she'd mentioned wanting to visit, the kind of place with a deep soaking tub and a fireplace in every room. It was not cheap. I wrapped it myself. Dinner was loud and warm in the way those dinners always were, and for the first hour or so, I almost let myself relax into it. I sat next to Daniel. I refilled people's glasses when they ran low. I helped carry dishes from the kitchen without being asked. I listened to stories I had heard before and laughed at the right parts. And then, Patricia's cousin, a large woman named Deborah, who had never spoken a full sentence to me, that wasn't a question about when Daniel and I were having children, said something that I didn't quite catch. She was at the other end of the table. I heard my name. I heard laughter. I looked up. Patricia was looking at her phone. She was reading something from it. Out loud. It took me a moment to understand what I was hearing. And then it took me another moment to understand where it had come from. It was a text message. From me. To Daniel. Sent 14 months ago, after a Christmas gathering where Patricia had told me, in front of 4 people, that my green bean casserole tasted like something from a hospital cafeteria. In the text, I had said, and I want to be precise here, that I was tired. That I felt invisible in his family. That I was starting to wonder if I would ever feel like I actually belonged. Or if I was always going to be the person standing slightly outside the circle, looking in. It was a private message. Sent to my husband. In what I believed was confidence. Patricia read it out loud at her birthday dinner. She read it in a voice that was slightly performative, slightly amused. The voice of someone sharing an anecdote they find both sad and a little ridiculous. When she finished, she put the phone down and said, "I just think it's interesting. The things people say behind closed doors." Renee laughed first, then Deborah, then several of the cousins, the ones who had grown up in this house, and learned early that laughing when Patricia laughed was simply what you did. Daniel said, "Mom, just that, one word." Patricia waved her hand. "I'm not trying to start anything. It's a birthday. I just think honesty is healthy." I sat very still. I have thought about that moment many times since. What I felt in those seconds was not what you might expect. It wasn't hot anger. It wasn't the sharp sting of humiliation, though that was there too, underneath. What I felt most clearly, most specifically, was a kind of settling. Like something that had been slightly off balance for a very long time, had finally, quietly, come to rest. I recognized the feeling. It was the feeling of understanding something completely. I picked up my water glass. I took a sip. I set it back down. Then I said, "Patricia, where did you get that message?" She smiled. "Daniel showed me." I looked at Daniel. His face had gone the color of old concrete. "I didn't, Mom. I didn't show you that. You saw it when you picked up my phone." "Same thing," she said, pleasantly. "It is not," I said, "the same thing." She shrugged. The table had gone quiet in the way that tables go quiet when people sense that something real is happening and they cannot decide whether to look away or lean in. Most of them leaned in. "I just think," Patricia said, folding her hands on the table, "that if you feel so invisible in this family, Maya, maybe you should ask yourself why that is. Maybe the problem isn't us." Deborah nodded. One of the cousins I didn't catch which one murmured something that sounded like agreement. I looked at Patricia for a long moment. Then I said, "You're right. I should ask myself that." And I smiled. And I helped clear the plates. "I need you to understand something about being an accountant. About what the job actually requires of you. At its core, it is not just numbers. It is documentation. It is the understanding that everything, every decision, every transaction, every transfer of value from one place to another, leaves a trail. And that trail, kept carefully, is the most precise record of the truth that exists." I had been keeping records for 6 years. Not because I planned to use them. I want to be honest about that. I kept them because it's simply how my mind works. Every payment I made on Patricia's behalf was logged in a spreadsheet I kept on my personal laptop. Date, amount, category, recipient. Property taxes. 4 payments totaling just under $9,000. HVAC replacement. $6,400. Roof repair. $3,100. Kitchen ceiling. $800 and change. Smaller things, a plumber, a new water heater, a vet bill for Patricia's cat that Daniel had mentioned in passing, and I had paid without comment, line by line by line, for 6 years. The total, as of the night of Patricia's birthday dinner, was $41,217. I had also, 18 months earlier, become the co-signatory on the joint household account that Daniel and I used to pay family expenses. It was a practical arrangement. I managed our finances. I was better at it, and Daniel had agreed without much discussion. That account had Patricia listed as a beneficiary for a recurring monthly transfer Daniel had set up years ago, before we were married, when his mother first started struggling. He had told me about it. I had never touched it, but I was on the account, which meant I had full authority over it. I left the dinner at 9:15. I told Daniel I had a headache. He offered to come with me, and I told him to stay, that it was his mother's birthday, that I was fine. I was fine. I was completely fine. I drove home with the windows down even though it was cold, because I needed the air. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and I opened the spreadsheet. I looked at it for a while. Then I opened my banking app, and I looked at the recurring transfer. Then I did the thing I had been turning over in my mind for the 45 minutes it took me to drive home. I didn't cancel it immediately. I'm not impulsive. I'm an accountant. What I did was compose an email. To Patricia. To Daniel. To Renee. Because Renee had laughed. And I felt that was relevant. I attached the spreadsheet. All 6 years of it. Every line item, dated and documented, with the corresponding bank statements clipped in as a PDF. I wrote 3 sentences above the attachment. I said, I wanted to make sure everyone had accurate records of our financial history as a family. I've attached a complete accounting of the contributions I've made to the household over the last 6 years. Going forward, those contributions will be discontinued, effective immediately. I scheduled the email to send at 8 a.m. the following morning. Then I opened the banking app and I paused the recurring transfer. Then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. I don't fully know how to explain that, but it's true. Now tell me, what time is it where you are right now? I want to know who's here with me for this part. My phone started at 6:47 in the morning. Patricia, I let it go to voicemail. She called back at 6:51, then at 6:54, then at 7:02, from a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be Deborah's cell phone, which told me that Patricia had called Deborah before 7 in the morning, which told me everything I needed to know about how the night had gone for her. Daniel came home at 7:15. I heard his key in the lock and I was already up, already dressed, already on my second cup of coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table and he said, Maya. I said, I know. He said, she's devastated. I looked at him. She read my private message to her family at a dinner party, Daniel. He looked at his hands. I know she did. That wasn't okay. He paused. But $41,000. Maya, she didn't know. That's correct, I said. She didn't know. He looked up. And I saw it on his face. Not anger, not blame, but something more complicated. Something like the beginning of understanding, moving through him slowly, like cold water. Why didn't you tell me? He said. Or why didn't you want her to know? I thought about that. Because I didn't do it for credit, I said. I did it because it needed to be done, and I could do it, and I thought we were family. I thought that's what family did. He was quiet for a long time. She wants to call you, he said. I know, I said. I saw. Are you going to pick up? I took a sip of my coffee. I'm going to go to work, I said. I have a 9 o'clock. He didn't try to stop me. I think, somewhere in him, he understood that there was nothing to stop, that I wasn't running away from something, but simply moving forward, the way you do when you finally know exactly where you stand. Patricia arrived at our building at 11 p.m. I know because the front desk called up. I didn't go down. Daniel went down. I could hear his voice in the hallway, low and careful, and then I heard her not words, just the sound of her crying, which was loud and unguarded in a way I had never heard from her before, because Patricia was not someone who cried unguarded. Patricia performed. Patricia managed. This was something different. Daniel came back inside. He stood in the living room doorway and looked at me. "She wants to come up," he said. "No," I said. He nodded slowly. He went back out. I heard more of her voice. Then the elevator. Then quiet. Daniel came back and sat down on the couch, and we sat together in the silence for a while. "She said she didn't realize," he said eventually. "I know," I said. "She said she never meant to make you feel." "Daniel," I said it gently. "I know what she's saying. I understand. But knowing and meaning are two different things. She did it. She did it in front of 23 people. And before that, she did 100 smaller things. For 6 years. And I was there for all of them." He didn't say anything. "I'm not leaving you," I said, because I wanted to be clear about that. "I'm not ending our marriage. But I am done with the arrangement we had. I am done making myself smaller so that everyone around me can feel bigger. And I am done paying for a home that treated me like a guest who had overstayed." He reached over and took my hand. "Okay," he said. Just that. We sat there until nearly midnight, not talking very much, just sitting. I want to tell you what happened after, because I think this part matters. Daniel and I went to couples counseling. Not because our marriage was broken, I want to be clear about that, but because I believe that when something has been quietly wrong for a long time, you don't fix it by just deciding it's over. You do the work. We went every Thursday for 4 months. Some of those sessions were very hard. Some of them were the most honest conversations Daniel and I had ever had. He came to understand over time what it had cost me. Not just the money. The energy. The years of managing my own reactions so carefully. Of editing myself in rooms full of people who had already decided what I was. He came to understand that loving someone's family is an act of choice that has to be met with something not gratitude necessarily, but basic regard. Basic humanity. Patricia and I have not spoken since the night she stood in my hallway. She sent a card, about 6 weeks later, handwritten, 2 pages. I read it once. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't understood. She said the money didn't matter, and I noticed that she said it that way. That the money didn't matter, rather than offering to return it, which told me something. She said she hoped we could move forward. I thought about it for a long time. I am still thinking about it, if I'm honest. What I know is this. An apology that comes after consequence is not the same as an apology that comes from understanding. I don't know yet which kind hers was. I may never know. And I have made a quiet peace with not knowing. At least for now. Renee called me once. I picked up, because Renee was not Patricia, and I thought she deserved that much. She said, "I shouldn't have laughed." I said, "No, you shouldn't have." There was a pause. She said, "I didn't know you'd been. I didn't know about any of it." I said, "I know." Another pause. She said, "I'm sorry, Maya." And I believed her. I don't know what to do with that belief yet, but I'm holding it. I went back to work the Monday after the birthday dinner, and I sat down at my desk, and I opened my spreadsheets, and I did my job. And something that had been sitting on my chest for a very long time was not there anymore. I want to say something to you, whoever you are watching this right now. Whether you're in your kitchen in the morning, or lying in bed late at night, or sitting in your car in a parking lot because you needed 5 minutes of quiet before going inside. There is a version of helping that comes from love. And there is a version of helping that comes from fear. Fear that if you stop, you will be proven right about what you suspected all along, that you were never really wanted, only useful. I confused those two versions for a long time. I told myself I was choosing generosity when sometimes I was choosing invisibility, because invisibility felt safer than the risk of being truly seen and found lacking. The spreadsheet existed because I am an accountant. But I think I also kept it because some part of me, some quiet, careful part knew that one day I would need proof. Not to punish anyone, just to prove it to myself. To be able to look at a number and say, this was real, this happened, I was here. $41,217. I was here. Walking away from people who cannot see you is not cruelty. It is not abandonment. It is not failure. It is the moment you finally decide that being seen is not too much to ask. That it was never too much to ask. I went to work that Monday morning. I made my coffee. I opened my laptop. I did the work. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I felt like myself. If this story stayed with you, if something in it felt familiar, or true, or like something you've been trying to find words for, I hope you'll stay. There are more stories here. Not easy ones, but honest ones. And if you're carrying something heavy today, I just want you to know. You counted every cent, and you were worth more.